is Dr. Lou McMahon. I am team lead of the Water and Energy for Food Grand Challenge. And I'm really excited this morning here to introduce the Dexis team, who has done a midterm evaluation on the program. The bigger picture context, Water and Energy for Food started about 3 years ago in the donors' heads and 2 years ago in actual on the ground startup with the hubs and the first innovations. And so we're at about the halfway point. The program is currently expected to end in 24, June 24 for two of our hubs and July 25 for the other. So we're just at the midway point and trying to see what's happening and how things are going. And so with that, I'll introduce the Dexis team of Addie and David, et cetera, to introduce themselves and then get started with their presentation. We've turned off the audio function. So if you've got questions, please put them in the chat. And then the Secretariat Manager, Jatin Yadev, will go through those questions and help facilitate that part of the discussion in the second part of the conversation. This meeting will be and is being recorded. So if you are uncomfortable being recorded, we ask you to drop off of the line and the recording will be shared publicly. So with that, Addie and David, I turn it over to you.
Great. Many thanks, Ku. Addie, would you kick off and take a start? I'll then come in on some points, and then Elise will follow up on further, and then I'll draw the recommendations together at the end. Addie?
There.
Eddie, maybe
All
you.
right. Thank you very much. Oh, can you hear me? All right, perfect. All right, thanks so much, everyone, for joining us this morning and afternoon. Today, we are presenting the WE4F midterm evaluation conducted by the Dexis Consulting Group. Joining us here today is David Hempson, who is our team leader, who brings subject matter expertise in areas of water and climate, as well as one of our senior consultants, Elise Pierners, who is bringing expertise in the agriculture, food value chain sectors. And there are other senior consultants who unfortunately was not able to attend this meeting is Sarah Mangones, who brings environmental safeguards and extended experience in the field of WASH. And I am Addie Bryan, joining from the Dexis Consulting Group. So to kick us off, the WE4F theory of change illustrates how WE4F helps to achieve 4 key areas of impact, specifically innovator sustainably scaling in their market, consumers using products, services of innovators, increased food production through efficient water or energy usage throughout the value chain, and increased income for innovation and users. Next up, the WE4F midterm evaluation was looking at how the program was responding to these key issues. The first 2 issues refer to increasing production income. The third issue here in green refers to sustainability aspects along innovation and commodity value chains or life cycles. And the fourth issue here is about effectiveness, enabling environment. And then this final issue here is the scale up. So looking at the portfolio approach of the WE4F program, the effectiveness and efficiency and sustainability of innovators' business, sales and profit. Going back to the key issue on sustainability, one of the recommendations is to just add sustainable use here to the key issue. In terms of the evaluation, so the Dexis Consulting Group evaluation team implemented a Sioux Impact midterm evaluation. We looked at 3 of the regional innovation hubs under the USAID Secretariat. By region, specifically the Southeast Asia, 9 countries. There are 10 countries in the Middle East, North Africa region, and 7 from the South Central Africa region. The evaluation used the OECD DAC criterion along the program and innovation levels, with an emphasis of the evaluation looking on relevance, coherence, effectiveness, sustainability, and we also present impact results. In terms of the overall evaluation approach, we used mixed methods. We had a representative sample of 21 of 81 innovations in 7 countries reviewed. The selection criteria for the sample looked at aspects ranging from the geographic region, call round, status, focus type, the number of innovations in the country. And then in terms of the quantitative and qualitative data, the evaluation team looked at the administrative data from the WE4F program, as well as implemented field surveys and key informant interviews with our own local evaluators. And I will pass it over to David to talk about relevance.
Thanks,
David?
Sadie. Sorry, it's a little slow to unmute. In relation to relevance, we looked at the particular goals, overarching goals internationally and nationally, and we found that most innovation companies are locally owned and incorporated in participating countries. In other words, they are based in the regions and they spread throughout the region. Generally, we see that innovations show relevance in terms of having potential impact in water and energy for food. That's clear. In other words, the selection criteria have been rigorously applied. We see that the rising end user numbers show that it's relevant in terms of the end users, in terms of the awareness of opportunities available to save water and energy, and it has a direct positive effect on their farming operations. And then in SSCA, that is Southeast Asia, there's relatively high level of women participation, but we found that there's a lag in other regions, in particular MENA. And we found the challenges were those of scaling and greater participation by women. And we found that the respondents to the RIH found that the program generally is relevant to countries' needs, particularly at this time when internationally there's a crisis in terms of food to the bottom of the pyramid and rising prices in terms of seeds and fertilizer. Next slide. And then in terms of coherence, we are looking at the coherence in terms of, again, internal country programs and international programs. Well, as we probably are not surprised to learn, the program is broadly aligned to the SDGs, and in particular, zero hunger, no poverty, life on land, gender equality, reduced inequality, climate action, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. And so that's quite a wide swathe of SDGs, and we number them here in the slide to show the relevance and coherence, the way in which different programs can work together. And we find the SDG, the program provides specific avenues, particularly into the second SDG, which relates to environment and to agriculture, and SDG 1, no poverty, and SDG 13, climate action, reducing emissions in agriculture. There are very specific goals and measures in the program which integrate in and bring coherence to actions which are taking place nationally and internationally in the field, and that the program contributes quite significantly in that manner. I'll pass on now to Elise.
Yes. Hello. Okay. Yeah. Let me continue with the findings on effectiveness. Most innovations, few innovations focus on water only, and many are either energy only or food and energy. And in the pre-award phase, all respondents found that the process had positively impacted their organization's administrative and financial systems. As you know, in that phase, a few things are required from them. The disbursements are on track. Also, 44% of the grant that is committed in 3 years is now already disbursed. It's actually more than what was planned for the first year. In terms of TA, technical assistance, the surveyed participants of this, they scored very high levels for in all the 3 regions. That was much appreciated. Most of the technical assistance is training and learning events for business related subjects, financing included. And some training is also about base of the pyramid. The M&E that the innovators have to do, the readiness for data collection is good. There's goodwill to do that, but it's to a certain extent it is not easy. So there are some small comments here and there, but the readiness is really good. The enabling environment support that the program provides, many surveyed people or respondents in the quality of service survey they find they underline it's very important and that more local expertise could be used to be effective in enabling environment support. Part of the enabling environment support is this end user finance, and there are just few poorer end users that have accessed financing. None of those that we surveyed had accessed it, but there is some efforts in the program to make access easier with financial support built into pricing and credit. Next slide. Then on investment facilitation, that's really successful. Innovations mobilized $8.6 million external funding. And with that, and also with their own contributions, the part of the program is 15% of the total funding. The prognosis is that the target of this indicator of mobilizing 34 million, which is 4 times what is now mobilized, it can be reached. The partnerships at an early stage, there were respectively 57 and 34 partnerships created in SSEA and MENA. The program expects that at least 40% of the innovations approach within 80% their own end user target. And we found that they did. 67% actually approached their end user targets. Next. Efficiency. Well, the portfolio has developed the rigorous monitoring, and intensive risk and performance management is expected to achieve greater efficiency. Proportionally increased costs associated with more intense fund management and capacity building, the approach that this program follows, are compensated by the effective learning, and that is by and between regions and innovators. There is a diversity of learning events that are organized. Or learning is taking place in a diversity of events, meetings, annual boot camps, etc. Grants, they generate additional resources. And so we find that the 2.3 million grants so far has led to this 8.6 million external funding. The founding partners are also active, directly engaging, leveraging grants, and they also create some synergy between innovations and other donor country initiatives. Next. On monitoring, evaluation, and learning. As said before, rigorous monitoring of output, outcome, and some impact, especially on food production, There is a strong learning element in this monitoring, evaluation, and learning, and indicators and instruments are not always clear to innovators. And also to us, we have been looking for clarifications, and now they are of course clear, so that is some process. The qualitative data to establish productivity, well, productivity in terms of inputs in water and energy and how much production that yield that establishes. It would be useful to have these data, but it is not yet available. Or, yeah, there is some data we heard about yield, but there's not enough about that. We think about collecting data on yield. Impacts. The regional and end user targets are being met and passed by large margins. However, there is some that really pass their targets by multiple times and others do not. So it is very variable between innovations. Energy saved, 24 million kilowatt hours saved in year one. There also is a lot of diversity. And there is greater savings in Southeast Asia for smallholder farmers, and in MENA it is more savings by medium and to large farmers. Improved access, 48% of the end users in Southeast Asia and 10% in MENA report improved access to energy due to innovation. And energy transition is taking place in Southeast Asia. 69% of end users change their energy source, and that is, we can assume that's practically all towards renewables. In MENA, no energy source changes were reported. Next. Water, increased water availability and accessibility. There was considerable evidence of that. Use of solar water pumps, especially. Food production, the SSEA end user survey reported improved yields due to reduced reliance on rain and better water management or irrigation and production practices. The monitoring and learning system also provides production data, but not yield data. I said that before, yeah. Income of end users, 89% of end users survey respondents say that their income increased as a result of the innovation. A high level of end users reported that women's income had also increased. Next, sustainability. At innovator company level, the sustainability of the company business, 33% of innovators, they reach their profit margin of 8% EBITDA. And job creations, we did not see much. Few additional jobs were reported so far. We do not think that job targets are easily reached, but it is based on the information we have so far. And user confidence, nearly all say they will recommend the innovations to others. That is what end users say. And I think that contributes to innovator company sustainability. The greenhouse gas emission saving, there is monitoring using, people have been trained to use, the innovators have been trained to use CLEAR to monitor carbon emission. There's more information needed on how that is calculated. And there are emission savers. Smallholder women contribute most to emission savings, we found. Innovations with focus on water and energy appear to be the most, and they save more than those only for focusing on energy. Next. There is an environmental impact assessment instruments. The IEE and the EMMP is to make a plan to address the impact. They tend to focus on direct effects. That is known for environmental impact type instruments. They do not look much further up and down the value chain, and if further up and down the value chain issues are identified, they're often treated as externalities. For example, that some of the innovations could lead to increased or also in reduced use of external inputs other than water and energy, Or there could be increased use of water, where like solar pumps also allow increase of land area. The use of land, as I say in the third point, or land use changes and greenhouse gas emission other than carbon could be an effect. For example, there were livestock numbers were supposed to increase in some of the innovations, or there was a mention of not a system not being in place for disposal or recycling of, for example, solar panels or other. And biodiversity effects further up in the life cycle. They're also not. Well, there is not much assessed. It is only assessed mostly what happens on farm level. Next. Conclusion. We try to draw conclusions, just summing up conclusions for the 5 key questions. Is food production increasing? Yes, we think the program increases food production while saving energy and has a positive effect on the transition towards renewables. The support also helps to make water more easily accessible. There are mixed signs on the efficient and sustainable use of water. Does income increase for the base of the pyramid, women and men in both rural and urban areas? Yes, we think the program contributes to income increase according to those who were surveyed. 89%. A high level of end users reported women's income also increased. Next. Then 3 more key questions about promoting sustainability. Yes, the program promotes sustainability. However, the focus is on use of water and energy. So it is not an entirely holistic approach. Current processes and instruments do not sufficiently capture environmental and socioeconomic unintended effects. Then does it promote political and financial enabling environment for dissemination of climate-friendly innovations? Yes, that is also a lot happening in promoting political and financial enabling environment. Especially on removing hurdles of various kinds, and the innovators emphasize the importance of doing more on removing hurdles and with your local expertise. Is the program sustainable? Does it sustainably scale innovator solutions to meet the challenges in the water, energy, and for food nexus? The portfolio approach, combining grants with all these services on technical assistance, investment financing, and improving the enabling environment, together with this intensive risk management, we think that this is an effective approach to building innovators' capacities and enabling learning. It is expected to achieve comparative efficiency. The grants generate additional resources. I think that is...
Right.
Yeah?
Thanks, Elise. Yeah. We now move on to the key question of recommendations, and starting with relevance. We're suggesting that we look to ways in which we can strengthen the enabling environment, and we should use the innovations and financial services which drive other stakeholders to demonstrate that women's engagement and their benefit requires equal freedoms and wages. And secondly, in terms of strengthening a promotion strategy, we suggest that the program needs further promotion strategy to drive women's end users' success. And in relation to that, rather than just as a matter of principle, we're thinking of proposing appropriate technologies and the prioritization of food security, which we feel would draw in more women as end users. And then finally, showcasing marginalized group participation. There are successes in terms of relevance, and we want to identify and promote the innovators in terms of cost sizes and quantities to show which have proven to be the most successful in meeting the needs of these groups and ensure sufficient access to finance to pay for innovation solutions. Next slide. In relation to coherence, one of the findings was that at times there's insufficient linkage between country programs, donor country programs, and those of the program. We look to establish improved communication channels between the USAID and the GIZ managed hubs to improve cross ROH learning, and that's hub learning, and therefore the overall effectiveness of the program. There's great enthusiasm for such learning, we've found. Secondly, the intended impact of innovation should be explicitly related to specific SDGs. This is in terms of showing that the work of the program integrates with both country programs, because just about all countries have SDG programs, and that is contributing towards national and international objectives. And then the SDG advancement at the national and regional level, the program could present sets of innovations to decision makers to demonstrate how innovations contribute to specific SDGs, in particular SDGs, and promote coordination, integration with government priorities. Fourthly, particular attention should be given to Goal 15 to protect, restore, and promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems and halt biodiversity loss. This is a particular strength of the program, and we feel it could be better known. And then finally, the hubs should showcase innovation showing sustainable agriculture to integrate in national programs and these SDG dimensions filled by the program. Next slide. In relation to effectiveness, there are questions in relation to enabling environment to optimize the learning from participants' own expertise. We had very high scores for the work of the hubs in terms of TA, but we feel this is where they could be further strengthened, or using local experts and business member organizations to find context-appropriate ways to unite forces to address barriers. Secondly, and again in terms of enabling environment, to increase awareness of innovations contributing to climate change mitigation, to promote public policy decision makers, or policy to enable and invest in the WE for food innovations. Thirdly, to extend end user support, to link new finance to innovations to make or design innovations, and innovation training materials to make more accessible to more marginalized end users. We found considerable work in this area, but in some areas there was a feedback that we could do more. And fourthly, to consider gender mainstreaming in business plans in relation to job and pay equity. This is in particular in relation to employment within innovations and tailoring innovations to the needs of more marginalized groups. Fifthly, to ensure sufficient access to finance for innovation solutions that address the causes of the gender yield gap. And then finally, sixthly, to showcase marginalized group participation. Innovations which are successful in meeting the needs of these groups should be highlighted in communications and outreach materials and on the websites to expand and show confidence and success stories to make them better known. Next slide. In relation to efficiency, we are at this mid-term stage, we have not yet undertaken a full comparative examination of programs on a comparative basis, and we look towards getting support of donors and others, and academics and others who are looking to name programs that they can think relevant for comparison, and to provide data in terms of the program's approach and achieving the same goals with less time and money. This is a challenge to us, but the numbers are important. We have undertaken this in the past, and we want to pursue this into the future. Then in relation again to efficiency, to improve monitoring, evaluation and learning instruments and update indicators. We have had a constant or a continuing debate, with the Secretariat to make these more accessible and leaner, to make them more efficient and adaptable, possibly more online, more TA for innovations monitoring. We feel there's already been progress on this, but this is one of the recommendations we've made, and to continue learning events starting with relevant MEL innovation, such as summaries, to include success stories with a focus on women and job creation. Next slide. And then in relation to the critical issue of impact, which we did give considerable attention, although we've not yet had the time to be in the field long enough, first of all, to give closer and systematic attention to the issue of water saving and the challenge of water overuse and falling water tables by following procedures introduced by the International Water and others Institute, I forget the M now, for groundwater responsible solar irrigation. The turn towards solar pumping has been quite decisive, but it can have effects on the water tables, and we need to anticipate in advance and have remedies in place. Secondly, to promote innovation success stories and achieving significant savings in energy and in water. Thirdly, to further undertake end-user surveys to confirm income increases for smallholder farmers and the reasons for changes. We're looking towards undertaking quite a lot more surveys and increasing the numbers in each of the surveys. Fourthly, in the hubs and innovation should focus on calculating, capturing, and reporting crop yields. To changes in crop yields need a consistent examination over time to identify factors in the patterns and change. Now, in discussion with KIIs, with the interviews that we've had with the hubs and with innovations, we found that there is data there available in relation to yields, and we want to pursue that. Finally, the fifth point, to discuss the reasons for low levels of food processing, to understand the challenges involved, which is a bit curious. We've seen not much in food processing. As the program grows, food production data needs to be rigorously examined. Next slide. And then finally, on the critical issue of sustainability, we're proposing adopting a life cycle approach, the LCA here, but not to make this a monumental additional form to be undertaken by hardworking innovation, but to introduce innovations to the approach, taking responsibilities in the life cycle from technology sources and labor and so forth, to integrate into these considerations into core business. In other words, to have something which would be more of a tick box than a full 20-page report on issues and compliance. But we feel more could be done in that field. Secondly, to support innovations to adopt tailored LCA tools, we've proposed the ATTRA lifecycle assessment, which is a USDA, that's the Agriculture Department's approach. And this would either then replace the EIA and reporting would be integrated into the main reporting of innovations. This is a point we're not stressing too radically. We know that once a tool has been accepted, it tends to generate its own acceptance, but we need to think about that. And then finally, to be sensitive to agroecological approaches or instruments that help monitor. In other words, the effects on land use, on biodiversity, and greenhouse gases emissions, including nitrogen, oxygen. Now, and I think that is the last one. I think we move over to you, Addie, to discuss the next steps. Mm-hmm.
Thanks, David. Yeah, so thinking ahead to the next steps, so we have the submission of our final evaluation work plan, and then also its evaluation design. And then once those pieces are approved, it will be the start of the data collection period. And then in terms of just the broader thank yous, we definitely want to thank the hard work of our local evaluation team. We have Dr. Verender from India, who took up the surveys and KIIs in India and Nepal, as well as Dr. Samir, who undertook the surveys in Egypt. And then also we would like to thank the officials of the Southeast Asia, Middle East, North Africa, and South Central Africa regional innovation hubs for giving their time, especially given the demands of such a huge program like WE4F, and then also especially to the innovators who generously gave us their time and giving us great comments and explanations of their work, and keeping excellent communication with our team. And with that, I believe it's time for any questions, and thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Addie and Dexis team. And so with that, I will turn it over to Justin to facilitate the Q&A. So just a reminder that we've got the microphones off. So if you've got questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box, and then Justin will walk us through those and with the Dexis team. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Cook. So right now we have one question on what is the working definition of jobs created. I know Mackenzie's already answered in the chat that jobs created is defined in the V4F as new paid positions created and filled within innovator organizations, and they include both part-time and full-time roles, which are counted proportionally. But Dexis team, if you would want to add any additional input on the jobs created front.
Well, if I could just come in very briefly, obviously we're keenly interested to see gender mainstreaming, and at this stage we note that the numbers are not rising within the innovations that we would have anticipated, and the goal is to be reached, and we want to also measure and ensure that there are rising numbers or proportions of women at different levels, and particularly at the higher levels as well. So let's say this is still work in progress, and we'll be studying this in the next period. Mm-hmm.
Great. Thanks, David. So we'll give a minute more to see if there are more questions in the chat. I would request the participants to please type their questions in the chat, as the microphones are disabled for this webinar. Okay, there's one more question for the Dexis team. How should V4F balance MEL efficiency and also more collection on income as well as agriculture yield?
Elise, would you like to come in on that? Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, sorry. Could you repeat the question? Hello?
Yes, the question is, how should V4F balance MEL efficiency and also more collection on income as well as yield?
How should we value MEL efficiency? So there's a question about MEL, and there's a question about impact on income and food.
Yeah, how do we strike balance is the question, I guess. Between like having more data on income as well as efficiencies.
Yeah. I guess it is about how not to make the MEL system too cumbersome, and still do good planning to avoid environmental negative impacts. Is it to which slide do you refer to? Where is this question coming from? Because I find it hard to combine your question about the MEL system and about impact on food And
Yeah, well, let's keep them separate. The fact that they're delivered in as twins, we can have each twin one by one. I think the point in relation to Mel is that at times there are, let's say, it's reported that there is very, filling in all the data is a challenge, and this takes some time. And we have to consider that in our recommendations, when we make recommendations, that we're not adding to this burden. Can I say that one of the findings we had, which we didn't report fully here, was that despite the fact that the innovations respond and say this is something of a challenge to complete, it is reported, and maybe you'd like to come back on this, innovations, that the data gathering and reporting actually helps on the internal management of innovations. And so it does have a positive internal efficiency impact, as well as compliance issues. Elise, would you like to move on to the question of the relationship of income to yields?
Yeah, as we said, we have not yet sufficient data. We don't know the yields. We just know that some people think the yields are increasing, but we only have data on production, and we cannot relate it to area, so we don't have data on yields. What we have from the survey is that people feel that the yields increase, and we have data on income increase, but we cannot combine the two. At this stage, we're going to work on doing that for the final evaluation. We definitely want data.
Could I add that it's obvious that with increased agriculture production, if it's marketed, we will expect a high income to the household, and maybe more specifically to women. We have in the past examined innovations which prioritize women in terms of distribution of the crop. At the moment, we see something of a lag in terms of food processing. In the past, I think we've seen evidence, say, of washing vegetables like carrots, because that obviously increases their value enormously, and a higher price would be able to be gained by smallholders. And we will. There will be this relationship between improved production and income, and we'll be examining that dichotomy into the future. Other questions? Yeah.
Thanks, David. So thanks to our Secretariat team member, Catherine, we are able to now unmute the microphones, and we'll be taking questions. So Katie, if you want to go first.
I feel like Paul should go first to get his question out of the way. Paul, do you want to go?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much. For the evaluators, the question has been answered, but then I had a suggestion. So this should be taken as a suggestion or something that the evaluators and the client could interrogate going forward. So jobs creation, we're dealing with food production. We have mainly, a lot of seasonal workers, right? So sometimes I feel if you choose to consider jobs creation as a key, as one of the indicators, I'm thinking when it comes to the food production sector, is it possible going forward that one could consider, in terms of jobs creation, the amount of time that someone is engaged, some threshold, if this enterprise, if the participating innovators engage someone for, say, a threshold of 6 weeks or 12 weeks, then that person is that would be considered a job created. Because it's also possible that because we're looking at small entities, some of the people that get engaged really come as target workers, borrowing from my elementary economics. They come as target workers, raise a little money, then move on. So they won't be entered into the books as even part-time workers. So I'm thinking if we could look at the definition of jobs created and impose a threshold in terms of time and say, well, if this entity engaged someone for, I don't know, it could be 8 weeks or 12 weeks, we'll consider that as a job created. Then the findings that you've presented might turn out to be a little positive than the evaluators found. That's what I meant to say. It's a comment, it could be taken forward, it could be interrogated. That's my 2 cents worth. Thank you.
Thanks. And I'll speak
Paul?
hold on one second, David, because it's program-wide related. So to be clear, we had a program before this, 2 of them actually, Securing Water for Food and the Power and Agriculture Energy Grand Challenge. And it's really difficult to justify calling something a job created for seasonal workers because the income benefit is marginal at best usually. We did have some cases in the previous programs where you did have a significant income benefit, and then those seasonal workers were counted, but they go hand in hand. That we don't, as a program, count people who are marginal seasonal workers because there's really not a long-term benefit to them, as opposed to a farmer who gets a whole season's worth of income and then grows, or a company who adds 2 or 3 people whose then lives are improved and then has a longer-term income benefit. So that's why I completely agree. Our definition is extremely restrictive, but it's purposefully so. So we are not over-promising in the impact of the program, and we're instead being a little bit more conservative. But David, back over to you.
Thanks, Kerr. I see that you have defined it rigorously in the chat box. In fact, this is the indicator is specifically related to the innovations. And again, I suppose it relates to there will be seasonal activity in terms of, let's say, the seasonal cycles, that the innovations are probably not all operating at 100% all throughout the year, although some will be doing that. So I think, Paul, your points are useful. We'll take them into consideration, and maybe we'll see how we can integrate the relationship which Koos explained between time and work and the income actually generated, because we don't really want to count frivolous amounts, of numbers, and where there's very limited and seasonal employment. Thanks for your question.
Okay, thanks, Paul, Koo, and David. Moving to the next questions. Katie, you want to ask your question now, and then Nazmul?
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for turning on the mics. Let me turn off my hand and saving my typing. And the presentation too, I mean, it's a ton of good information, right? It's kind of hard to digest all at once. But a couple of things I was hoping you could expand upon that when I took a look at the earlier look at the report. One, in that report, you said there's little evidence of coherence between the innovations and national government interventions. I was wondering if you just had thoughts on that. Is that because I don't know, maybe we need to spend more effort with kind of the government counterparts? Is it because the scale of the program isn't big enough for them to pay attention? Is it because they're distracted by other priorities? It just kind of struck me that disconnect when, especially if you're talking in terms about the future and sustainability. So that's one area, if you could elaborate. The other was you talked a lot about improving the enabling environment, right? And it needs more attention, which kind of, enabling environment, is this, I wonder if you have more thoughts or specificity. Is this like national policies? Is this local policies? Is this, specifically targeted to regions? Is this corruption? Is this incentives? Is this because we don't maybe have close alignment with the government? What's driving, I guess, that disconnect as well? Okay, and that's why I didn't want to type all that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Katie, for your question.
Yeah.
Over to the Dexis team.
Can I? David, shall I start about the enabling
Please,
environment?
Elise, go ahead. Yeah, I've got some
Yeah.
points, but you speak.
Yeah, that was, I looked in all the comments from the service quality of service survey, and that is where the things came up. And some people volunteered in the comments section to provide all sorts of barriers and hurdles that they face. So it's all of them that you can imagine. There is issues with corruption, there is issues with supply lines, or there is issues with too high taxes or other red tape. There's a lot of different difficult issues that every entrepreneur is looking into. So yes, I think that enabling environment, they feel they should do something like on a policy level. If you do that, then the suggestion that I have in my experience, it is good to work with organized entrepreneurs in business member organizations. There is where you find all the expertise to address policy issues. And that is when you use this approach, making markets work for the poor. The enabling environment for these businesses should be addressed at the policy level. And some of them felt that the local experts that were mobilized for that were actually not very local, and there would be more local experts needed, or more people from their sector or their trade.
Could I come in on the first question?
Yeah.
I don't think we did find that there was poor articulation between the program and national initiatives. What we did find was that needed to the positive contribution of the program should be better known. That was one side, and secondly, we did find some mention, but not. We were expected a little more in terms of donor country initiatives. In other words, USAID may be active in Pakistan, or let's say rather Bangladesh in this case, and would be able to integrate, say, a program which has small scale financing into a specific innovator's field, or other such local connections between broad program initiatives at a donor level and the WE for food as well. In other words, we did notice that sometimes people mentioned this positively and said it was beginning. The hub said it's beginning, and they want to, do more of that. So we didn't find that it wasn't happening. It was rather that maybe at this stage it needed to be worked on.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, David and Elise. Nazmul, do you want to unmute yourself and ask the question?
Yeah, thank you very much. To the team, I have a couple of asks and just ideas or sharing with you. First, I will go with this evaluation process. Unfortunately, so far, we are the only one in Southeast Asia whose evaluation took place online. So this was unfortunate for me. Anyway, how did the evaluation measured COVID impact, adversity on innovations and return on investment due to chronic COVID era last 2 years during our implementation, number one. Number two, innovation readiness. Did you find innovations are ready and matured enough to supplement national plan so that regional innovation hub or We4 hub can start negotiation with government for national level funding channel? Number three is innovation with regional or global level replication potential, so that it could be a policy issue for government and USAID and other donors to reach wider communities. And how did you find gaps between physical versus online method of MTR? So I did find always very difficult. Anyway, do you have quantification of data, say for number of employment in South Asia or Southeast Asia has generated, or other indicators, quantifiable indicators? And This is number 4, innovation with merit for connection with government, United Nations, and public-private sectors. So it is very essential that companies like us or innovator like us to find channels for future growth, sustainability linkage, and their own capacity building and channeling other funds, not only depending on donor funds. And finally, what are the gaps so far identified in the process of innovation which needs support for its growth and development for next few years within the region or within the regional innovation hubs? And finally, what are the constraints you have faced in this MTR, and what are the recommendations for innovators from MTR group or team? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Fazal, for your question. I'll turn it over to the Dexis team, but we can bucket these questions, I think, into 2 or 3.
Yeah. Well, look, can I congratulate, I didn't quite catch the name, but on a very rigorous way of interrogating the interrogators. Look, if I could respond to the points first, and I've numbered them, and my numbering comes to 7. But first of all, in relation to the impact of COVID, I think we were a little insensitive to that, mainly because we were seeing the strength of coming out in different ways and that the program was actually quite resilient in being able to come out. So we didn't measure that in terms of numbers, but we did measure it in terms of the KIs, which we undertook at different levels. Then if we're looking at the second question, the readiness and coordination with national plans, I think that question, if I've got it right, is still some work in progress, because we didn't really ask that specifically as a question, but we were open to recording and through KIs at the hub level and elsewhere, what readiness there is. Can I say that we found that, given the sustainable functioning of innovations and the rising number of end users, we felt that showed a certain readiness, if you could answer that question. I'm just maybe I'll just move on to some questions, and then Elise, if you could come in and answer the others. In terms of finding gaps in surveys, well, the surveys which we undertook, we have found some questions which the donors have asked us to report on. We found we had maybe our questionnaire wasn't as comprehensive as it could be. Please remember that we sometimes have only 2 days in the field, and our local consultants undertaking these surveys are under extreme pressure, to get adequate numbers in the sample. So we're now going to be working and proposing that we would have modules, particularly on, say, income and women in one, and maybe in terms of increased agriculture on the other, so that we would close the gaps. In other words, we'd be able to fire on all cylinders and to be able to provide data on all issues. I could go on, but I'm reluctant to have too long a male voice here. Elise, would you like to come in on the 4 to 7?
Yeah. Now, the modules, I think what David means is that we cut the interviews in separate modules, and we can come back to the same respondent with different sets of questions so that we can ask more questions. Yeah. The gaps between physical and online, we have, as David said, we have tried to bridge this by using local consultants doing the interviews for us. And that was a very close collaboration. We want to continue with these same consultants because that was very helpful. That way we can interview end users or survey end users also, as well as innovators. The question of not depending on donor funds alone, I think that is a core part of the investment facilitation that the program does. And so the program contributes to the innovators not being depending on just the grant from this program. And we have shown that that's actually really successful. What constraints faced in this midterm review? I think that's to you, David.
Well, we identified
the constraints that we faced.
In our methodology, we tried to identify, well, we did identify those questions which we could answer in full and those which we couldn't answer for reasons A, in terms of insufficient data, in other words, not having enough time to be able to gather enough data, particularly in the end user surveys, and B, in terms of the program or not yet being matured enough. In other words, a midterm review, sometimes many of the questions which are aimed at a final review, a full-scale review, cannot be answered in terms of the maturation of a program. We now feel that we've been able to surmount both of those, because now, as we move ahead, the program is mature. We've taken on we do interviews with innovations which have now done considerably more than 12 months in the program, and we're able to measure more or less the impact that has resulted from being involved in the program. So I think we've been able to deal with some of those constraints. We recognize those constraints, A, in terms of time, and B, in terms of the ability to do sufficient data collection. And I think we'll be surmounting those in the future.
Great. Thanks, David and Elise, for taking all the questions. There's one more question from the chat from Carmen. She says, thank you for great presentation and evaluation. So did the innovators comment on the reporting and data gathering burden? So was it a burden for the innovators, or did they find something that ultimately benefited their business from this evaluation?
It was both, as I got it from the quality of service. They were some of the data collection helped them also to see the processes in their business. And some also said, well, there's some part, it's difficult, the data collection, and it is a lot. That could be monitoring of water or other things, but it could also be the environmental impact assessment instruments that were used. But it is very hard to make this quantified, because these are comments that you pick up left and right. And if you see the comments repeating from different sources, then you think, okay, like the comment on the importance of enabling environment.
Yeah.
But of course, you will always have people saying that the data collection is a tedious job. And that's to do this for the environmental aspects, the idea that this becomes part of the core business will make it more productive, part of the core production process, and not part of what people see as an outside requirement or compliance requirement.
Right. As we go into the future, we'll be picking up feedback from the innovators. Look, the initial tool that we developed, asked questions on every question that we had. In other words, if we had a lot of questions, it meant we had to have quite long KRIs. I think we are now re-examining that because we've got a considerable amount of quantitative data, which Mackenzie will be delivering to us, and we'll be, going through all that. In other words, we're not short of that data. So maybe the KRIs will be amended in the future, and we're working on that, to be able to capture the essential without burdening the innovators with, say, a 2-hour or 2.5-hour interview, and to be able to capture what's really essential by examining the specifics of an innovation and asking questions which are tailored to that context.
Great. Thanks again, David and Elise, for your responses. I don't see any more questions in the chat. If anyone else present on the call has any other questions, please raise your hand. Dr.
Hello,
Koo?
sorry, Jatin. I'm on the phone, so I can't raise my hand nor write in the chat. But if there's space for a question, I could maybe jump in.
Yeah, please go ahead, Pia.
Yes, I just wanted to ask, from what we have understood from hub managers and others, is that the call for innovations process has been considered very burdensome for the program. And I was wondering if this is something that you have come across in your interviews, and also I haven't read the latest version of the report as of yet, but we're now changing the modes for call for innovations, and I was just thinking if this has not been examined in this evaluation, if that could become part of the final evaluation to sort of compare the two modes, sort of call for innovations that we have used thus far, and the new process that we are introducing in the possible extension of the program. So, but just a question for now, if whether you have experienced or if you have any information regarding how the call process has been perceived by the hubs and also the innovators in the program. The selection process per se. Thank you very much. This is Pia Lindström from SIDA, by the way.
Great. Thanks, Pia. David, over to you. And David, Elise, you all may be on mute.
Yeah, I can answer, but I'm not sure if David wants to answer. I know that we have not investigated the call process and how the selection in detail, and this is what we intend to do in the end phase. But David, you want to add? No, is he still there?
Maybe on mute. Okay, I think he's gone off the call and he'll join back in. Meanwhile, Dr. Koo has his hand raised. Do you want to go ahead?
Maybe I could explore a little bit further, Pia, because I think we have discussed the environmental effects, not just the water and energy, but beyond that. And I think that could be integrated in the call process more. And of course, that is where the environmental impact assessment also sits at that stage, I think. But we have not further investigated the process. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for all of the work so far, greatly appreciated. And so my question connects really to what you're finding at the bottom of the pyramid. Because, you know, one of the challenges that was highlighted in the last evaluation is for these businesses, you know, to make money to be sustainable without donor funds, and working outside of, you know, the scope of where we want them to be with the base of the pyramid. And so what were you finding both in your interviews with the businesses and also with the end users around that? You know, are they mostly base of the pyramid folks that you are seeing using the innovations, or is it a little bit across the board, depending on the region, different types of people using the innovations?
Apologies, I had a little of a power problem here. Koo, that's quite a profound question, which we are examining. I think you know, what would help us in terms of data would be those innovations which straddle, which cover different countries within the same region. And having the advantage of the surveys which the Secretariat is undertaking and the end user surveys which we are doing, I think we'd be able to make progress in answering that question, Ku.
But from what you've seen so far, what is the general view from your limited surveys? Is it that most of these people that you've interviewed are at the base of the pyramid, or that there's a mix of people at the base of the pyramid who are using the innovations and people that are at other income strata, rich farmers or larger holders, landholders, farmers?
Well, the general point, and Elise may want to come on this, is that I forget the exact figure, but it's surprisingly high. Was surprisingly high to me. That we found that the two lowest income categories were actually well represented in each of the surveys, and other data which we were gathering and or having access to seemed to confirm that. I think there were some differences in regions. This was particularly, the point I'm making was particularly strongest in Asia and less noticeable in MENA. But in both these regions, we did notice there was more than a majority at the base of the pyramid and some quite high figures in particular innovations. So in other words, the growth in end users, which we've remarked on, and which is already meeting and overreaching targets, is happening, and it's happening with end users which are at the bottom of the pyramid, which is a very big plus for the program. Lisa, I don't know if you want to add anything
Nothing,
there.
No, these are just technicalities on how these income quintiles have been done, but it is not for this meeting. Yeah.
Right, but we'll
I
pursue
agree.
that. Yeah, we'll pursue that further, and that'll be one of the issues that we'll examine in analysis and data collection.
Yeah, sometimes it's just difficult that you have one indicator and you apply it to very different regions, where in MENA you generally have very large farms, much larger, and a small farm is maybe just 5 hectares, whereas in Southeast Asia, irrigated areas, a farm of 1 hectare is already big, and then most people have less. So, but when you have income quintiles, you can better measure that, and that's what we did. What the program did, yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks, David and Lisa again. So we'll take one final question from Nazmul in the chat. This is on the observation of the entire program for future directions with respect to the diversification of opportunities. I think it's in future, what recommendation you would have where V4F can have a greater impact, either economical, by innovation, or environmental? I think that's the question.
Well, he had a previous question, Justin, on the financial analysis on return of investment.
Yeah, well, let's do that. Lise, would you examined that? Could you come in on that?
Yeah, well, we have these clear figures. The return on investment we have shown that 8.9. The figures, I have to get them from the presentation, but I think that it's a very good return on investment if with relatively small funds, innovators raise a lot more funds. And the figures we have presented it to you, I can pick it up again, but that I think is a strong part of the program.
Yeah. Well, look, in relation to return on investment, I mean, one of the indicators, Elise, I think you'd agree with that, is EBITDA, which indicates, the profits which are being made. The ability of approaching the plus 8% in EBITDA, and that is quite a rigorous measure of financial sustainability. And if that innovation is gathering end users who are at the bottom of the pyramid, that indicates quite a sophisticated, well, let's say quite a mature, response both to the challenge of need and to the challenge of sustainability. In other words, being able to meet continued need. I think we need to possibly we haven't know that return on investment, is quite a rigorous financial category, and we may be able to undertake more analysis in the future. But at the moment, the indicators which I have mentioned indicate quite considerable economic soundness in a number of innovators. There's uneven response, but on the other hand, the approach of the program as a whole is what we've called managed portfolio. And that means that there was an expectation that 40% of the innovations will meet 80% of the targets. In other words, that it's anticipated there will be unevenness in being able to meet all the targets. In other words, the program is going according to plan. In relation to the the questions which Nazul raised, I think that was a question, observations of the program in relation to diversification opportunities. Let's say that diversification could happen, in my view, in two ways. In other words, internally within the innovation itself. And I think that there are less opportunities in that way because the innovations have signed specific business plans to meet specific targets. And it's very difficult to then diversify unless there's a crisis or some dramatic development. But I do think that the PPP approach, which has been put forward and as part of the TA, has considerable openings. In other words, what can't be achieved internally can be achieved in partnership. So maybe we will see further opportunities and for diversification through partnering, which is a definite feature and a practice which the program is advocating. Elise, do you want to come in on the environmental? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. On the environmental thing, I think some of the innovations are narrowly focused on that item that they can sell, which is the innovation. But if you see what the innovation does in terms of changing farm practices, there is a point to make for several of them to go wider and add a service package. For example, if you have again water pumps, then there could be a sustainable farming with irrigation package tied to it, or a way to address also the negative effects that such an innovation can have. Like this was this pumpkin farming, and yes, that could lead to more use of pesticides, but that is not somebody's problem. Or there's a lot of small effects that are not in control. Yes, there is at the end of life these solar panels, but that would be another project, hopefully, that takes care of it. I think internalizing these things would mean in a diversification within the innovator company.
If I could add, part of the feature of climate change, which we are noticing everywhere, is that there's warming, and that warming, in some ways can be contextual and environmental. In other words, maybe innovations are adjusting to a changing context, and a context which may, for instance, involve greater rainfall at different times. In other words, I think we'll have, we hope that the KIs, the interviews that we undertake, even if they are laborious, will pick up many of these issues and enable us to be able to give comprehensive answers to that question as well.
Great. Thanks a lot, David and Elise, for responses again. So I think that was the last question at our end. And I would like to ask if Dr. Koo is there and he would like to close the session.
Sure. So I just want to say a very tremendous thank you to David and Elise and Addie and their team, who are on the call, and those who we've worked with outside of this process, including their local evaluators. This is a tremendous amount of work. A lot of time has been put into this, and a lot of work remains to be done. The recommendations are very clear, and so we appreciate them. And we'll see if we can do them all. But you know, as will be seen in the 2022 We4F annual report, we've already implemented a good number of these recommendations in our both current plan for 2023 and our future planning. And with that, we'd also like to thank the hub teams for their time for the interviews, the innovations and innovators themselves, as well as those people in the field. And you know, similar to what we did in the last external evaluation, we plan to, for the final evaluation, some of the people who we interviewed, to then go back to them with an infographic that details kind of in the bigger picture sense what they contributed to, because we often have, you know, we go take information from people on the ground but don't give back. And so at a minimum, that's one of the requirements of this evaluation, and we'll continue to do that. But thanks everyone for your time, and we'll be sharing this publicly, and so your questions and your insights, we'll be looking at those things, and hopefully we'll be able to take some of these findings and use them, and as David and his team said, some of our public outreach going forward, especially within countries. So thanks everyone. Have a good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are. And we look forward to future conversations.